Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. Join with Owen and Jerry Ostroski. It is your first Draft Professor podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to learn something. You guys do this for a living. You extended an offer to come on the show, and I'm always looking to learn as much as I can, not only about content creation but also just football in general. I'm a huge fan of the All 22 that we can get in college now as well as the pros. So when you offered the chance to come talk about offensive linemen, which is obviously my favorite position, I had to accept.
Awesome. And Owen, it's good to see you. I think we're going to be seeing each other twice a week for a little bit here. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, we're gonna be doing these nights at 9 p.m. and I'll see you again tomorrow night at Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. back with Newt again to talk about some other side of the line with the big uglies, the D lineman over there. So I'm just doing a bunch of trench work for the next however many weeks we're doing this back and forth.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it, man. I mean, it's it's funny is I always thought I wanted to be a scout until I started doing all this with you guys, and I'm like, ooh, that's a lot of film to watch. That's a lot of film. But no, it's awesome. I'm excited about it and looking forward to the next, 7 weeks we're going to do this?
Yeah, and I think I have about 5 weeks worth of offensive linemen, which would give us 40. And then if we choose to do more, we can.
Okay.
So Eric Smith is draft professor. He's an offensive line coach, and he is tuning in. So, Eric, it is good to see you on the podcast. Thanks for stopping by.
Awesome.
So, if a draft professor, we break down the draft class 8 players at a time per podcast. So, for the next at least 5 Tuesday nights, we're going to be breaking down approximately 8 offensive linemen per podcast. So the offensive linemen we're going to discuss today are Caden Barnett from Wyoming, Brian Parker from Duke, Connor Lew from Auburn, Bryce Foster from Kansas, Cayden Green from Missouri, Francis Mauigoa from Miami, Vega, Ioane from Penn State, Iapani, Laloulu from Oregon. And what 7 of these offensive linemen have in common is when I asked the draft professors for who are your top 3 interior offensive linemen, they came up with 7 names. And then Owen, you brought in Caden Barnett. So Owen, you want to kick off Caden Barnett from Wyoming?
You're on mute, Owen. You're muted.
Looks like Owen's having a technical difficulty here, so right. I will filibuster for him. So, Caden Barnett from Wyoming, 6'5", 320. Jerry, I know that you described him as a house.
Yes.
Jerry, what did you see when you watched Caden Barnett?
Well, I think that Caden Barnett's your typical, college interior guy. He obviously has some experience playing outside of tackle, but he projects as a guard. I look at him as a day 3 guy because while he has the thing, and you'll hear me say this all the time, he's got the one thing that you can't teach. That's he's a monster, right? He's got monstrosity as far as size goes, but he does have to refine quite a bit of stuff. He's got to refine his body composition, lateral quickness, and things like that. This is a guy that NFL teams will bring in, probably put on the practice squad, and keep him around because with time, he could turn into a good player.
Owen, did we get your audio fixed?
Am I back at all?
Yes, you are.
You are back.
All right, awesome. Yeah, Caden was a guy that I was actually watching some UNI film because as we were talking about on the pre-show with Jerry, his son Owen is playing a UNI.
cut out again, Owen.
Yeah, so Owen, you cut out again.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is a guy, you look at him, he's really durable. He's a multi-year starter, has a really strong background in run blocking. He's effective in power schemes and things like that. And, again, you look at a guy like Barnett, you can't teach his overall size. I mean, his size is immense. And, there are things that you have to work on, but he's prototypical in size and frame. And like we talked about, he's a multi-positional player, a guy that can move people. And I think that's the biggest thing nowadays. And I'm curious to hear what Owen has to say about this. There's two different styles of offensive linemen nowadays. And I kind of, I study a ton of Buffalo Bills film. So obviously you're going to get a lot of Bills references. I apologize if you're a fan of another team, but you're going to get a lot of Bills references. As I believe these two guys on the screen with me can handle that. But, when you look at the Bills, they're an outside zone team. They're a lateral displacement team. They move people with motion, okay? They get outside the feet of the defensive lineman. They run. They make the gaps expand, and they get a lot of movement through lateral displacement. Cayden Barnett is what you would call a vertical displacement offensive lineman. He's going to put his hands on you and take you north. There's not a lot of lateral displacement out of him. He's a guy that can move you with his body, his size, and strength. So when you have teams that run that style of offense, like a Pittsburgh or a Baltimore, those are guys that I think would covet a guy like Barnett due to the fact that he can move people from A to B, and it's not so reliant on that lateral movement because we know that that's his weakness.
All right, let's try this for a third time. Am I good now, guys?
Yes,
you are great. You are absolutely great.
Jerry, you learned whenever I podcast, my cat decides that he wants to be the main star of the show, so he proceeds to want to jump around me and talk. He'll ignore me for hours and hours and hours per rant, but as soon as he sees me start talking at my desk, it's all go time for him. But he must have unplugged my mic and was running around the cords in the bottom here. But yeah, for Barnett, for me, he's a lot of what we talked about, and I'll throw out a reference here just so we don't keep it all Buffalo Bills, but that is definitely going to be our main go back to point when it comes to guys we're going to pull from or references we're going to have. But he reminds me a lot when I watched like Trevor Penning at Ioane.
Yeah.
Conveniently enough, I was watching Ioane when I first noticed Barnett because he's one of those guys that's big, physical, aggressive, especially downhill, moving guys, displacing them. But he can even have that tendency to be over aggressive and play outside of his technique because he wants to bury guys. And there's plays where he gets caught overextending himself, and that's where you get holds. And I do think he has some decent movement laterally when he gets off the ball and he's trying to be as a puller or reaching across a gap to try to secure a seal and edge. I think he can get out of the stance and move relatively well for his size, which is why I think they try him at tackle first. But when you're looking at him in pass protection at tackle as opposed to guard, he looks much more comfortable with more confined space there. So I do think he's definitely going to project inside to an interior offensive lineman position. He has that power and that ability to be a displacer going vertically, kind of like what Jerry said, especially if you can get a team that's operating with a lot of motion and getting guys to widen out and getting those one-on-one blocks. He'll be a guy you can benefit from plugging him into that. So I agree. I have him with a high day 3 grade for myself. I think he's a guy you draft and stash as either like one of your depth offensive linemen, or if you can get him onto your practice squad, not worrying about him to be picked up and on the waiver wire, you do that. But for me, I'm comfortable him being like one of my depth guards that if I just need someone to go in there and you're telling them, okay, hey, simplicity, we're going to down block this guy. We're not going to run a lot of complex pass protection slides or anything like that to overcomplicate him while he's still developing. I think he could be someone that you definitely can develop into a solid starter in the league if you really play into his strengths.
But would you not agree with me in the fact that I think that he is definitely a specific system type player? I think when I say that, I mean, he's a guy that's going to line up and block duo and things like that, as opposed to more of the outside zone type stuff. I think he's definitely a guy that needs to, when he is picked, that team has to be aware of what they do and do well. And he fits that scheme. Cause I don't think, while I know he could probably do it, especially after being in the NFL weight room, and it's different because instead of an hour and a half, a day or whatever, he's at the facility all day long. They can work on nutrition. They can work on conditioning and strength and agility and mobility and all those things. I just think that you need to really be aware with this guy, what sort of scheme you're running and I think he definitely fits certain schemes better than others.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree, and I think going back to our Buffalo Bills roots here that we were talking about, that's kind of what I thought about when they ended up taking a guy like Osiris Torrance, who was a bigger player, had that build and the movement ability. Where like, okay, he can definitely move a bit, but you like him best in those power gap schemes and systems where you're asking to block and climb to the second level through another player, and be more of a down blocking style player. Whereas they still do run some of those other concepts. It's just more so they're more fluid with what they do. Whereas with Barnett, you definitely want him to be in a system where they're leaning more heavily towards that duo and those combo blocks in the power gap scheme. But if you're going to ask him to, when you mix in wide zone stuff, he's not going to be, drowning out there as much as some other guys would be, which is what keeps him a bit above where I have him a bit higher than where I do.
Right.
Yeah. And Owen, I want to give you a shout out because you were the one that brought Barnett. Right, he wasn't on any of the player lists that I had. And Eric watched him, and Clint watched him, and Jerry watched him in addition to you. And all are coming back with relatively the same assessment. So I definitely want to give you a shout out for finding the player as well. So great job there. Owen, what do you have on Brian Parker from Duke?
So for me, Brian Parker is one of those guys that's going to be interesting in this evaluation, especially in this crop of guys that we're talking about today. We started out with Barnett, where it's like, okay, he played off his tackle at Wyoming. His senior year now, he's at guard. You can definitely see that I'm comfortable saying he's a guard exclusively at the NFL level. With Brian Parker, the second, he's been playing tackle exclusively at Duke, whether it's left or right tackle, over his entire career there. And you can see why they like him out there a bit more because he does have the ability to win some one-on-one blocks and be a guy that can operate on the outside, especially at the college level, and not be too detrimental when facing speed rushers and working in that space. But with the way he has those movement skills with his foot slides and other stuff that you look at when you're looking at tackles, or if you compare them to the top-end tackles you've scouted in the past, that they're more comfortable in space with change of direction and being able to play with less help. You think maybe Brian Parker may be best suited when kicking inside, especially with the fact that he does have some of that nasty ability to drive and get some movement on guys in the front. Even though he is on the lighter side at 305, you think kicking him inside, limiting the amount of space he works in and maximizing what he does best could work out well. But for right now, as an outside blocker, he isn't as out of his depth as, say, like a Barnett is, where you can see he, especially in pass pro, when he is kick stepping or trying to keep up with guys who are more fluid athletes, he's struggling to maintain even some of those limited mechanics. Parker has better mechanics, and he doesn't lose it entirely when he gets put in those kind of more space problems. But I do think with his overall skill set to maximize what you're getting out of him, I think a move to the interior may be better, like similar to another Duke player that came out in the past few years, like Graham Barton.
When I watch I've watched Parker a ton, and I've watched Parker a ton before even getting ready for this pod because if you guys know this, John Fina, former Buffalo Bill, his son Bruno Fina is the actual left tackle on that Duke offensive line, and Roman, his youngest son, is a true freshman offensive tackle signee on that team as well. So there's Finas all over the place. So I've seen a lot of Brian Parker. Parker intrigues me because he's a guy that's playing left. He's playing right tackle for Duke out of necessity, right? He's probably one of the most athletic linemen they have. He's an elite pass protector in college. He does have issues with the bull rush. He's not a guy that anchors very well. When you look at him, he's kind of a long, slight build guy. Reminds you of a Spencer Brown, a guy that's I think Spencer's probably the most slightly built, skinniest offensive tackle in the NFL. Obviously, it works for him. He plays really, really well. But Parker kind of reminds me, build-wise, of Spencer Brown. But when you watch him, he has some issues anchoring. He has some issues taking on the elite bull rushers. But he's a guy that, while maybe doesn't quite have the motor strength to get guys moving, when he does get his hands on you, you're not getting off. He is a finisher. When he gets his hands on you, he's obviously got great grip strength. He can get his hands on you, grab that jersey, and he's going to take you where he wants you. I think this guy is intriguing because, to me, he's a prototypical kick-in guy. And, Owen talked about moving him into guard, which I think is definitely what they're going to do with him. I honestly think Brian Parker is a center in the NFL. His IQ is highly he's a highly intelligent guy. His IQ's off the charts. He understands the game, and the way he plays, people don't understand. When you play center, it's difficult because why? The first part of the play, your right hand or your left hand is back between your legs snapping a ball, and you've got to do things with your body and steps and movement. And while I don't think that Parker is by no means an elite athlete, I think he's a very good athlete, and his intelligence will make up for a lot of stuff. His grip strength, the way he finishes blocks, able to run down the line of scrimmage with guys. I don't say just stop at center. I think he's going to end up being a swing man or guard. Excuse me. I think he's going to end up being a swing man at center and guard. I think that's where he projects. And especially in the NFL nowadays, back when I played, it was always so, low man wins and, how low can you get and bring the hands back to the hips and shoot them through and all this stuff. There's so much independent hands nowadays. And there's also a concept that line coaches talk about called high leverage. Okay. Aaron Kromer with the Bills is a huge high leverage guy. And that's usually the outside zone dudes that work on lateral displacement as opposed to vertical. But when you watch Parker, he's prototypical with this, the way he plays. And when I say high leverage, think of doing a hang clean, okay? If you've ever seen a hang clean and that bar goes just below your knee before you pull it up, that's kind of that high leverage position. It translates weight room to the field. Parker's one of those guys. I honestly think that he's probably I don't know if he's a second round guy. I think he's a high day 3 guy. I think he's a guy that there's a line coach out there that's into the science of things. And Kromer, like I said, we're going to use the Bills a lot. Kromer's one of those dudes. I could see him taking Brian Parker and turning him into a center. And I think eventually in the league, while he might start at guard, I think you'll see at some point he'll snap the ball.
Jerry, just a quick question for you with that, because the Duke had a player like that with Graham Barton was ended up being a first round pick, I believe, to the Bucks in recent draft years. I think like 2 or 3 drafts ago.
Right.
So some similar kind of projection where Barton was a tackle for them out of kind of necessity with injuries up and through his senior year, and then when he got to the circuit of playing at the Senior Bowl and some of these other things you do in the pre-draft process, that's when he finally started getting more buzz as a center prospect. Most people were saying he should probably kick inside to guard, but it was at the Senior Bowl where they tested him to see how he was able to react with snapping and then getting off and be able to get into blocks with that. How important is it for them to have that practice with snapping into blocks? Is there a worry about guys who maybe have never snapped before? Because I believe Parker only ever played left and right tackle at college so far. Are you worried about the functionality of the snap, the consistency there? Or is it more so if he'd be able to get the snap action off and then get into his blocks with proper timing as opposed to the snap action itself getting to the quarterback properly?
Well, I think that the big part of it is you practice with it. I mean, guys are going to give him a grace period if he's never done it before and he tries to learn. I'll give you an example. I'm a living example of it. I didn't play center since 7th grade or 8th grade. I was cut by the Atlanta Falcons, I was cut by the Chiefs, and I was doing a free agent deal at the end of the year where to go. I had like 3 workouts, and one of them was New England when Bill Parcells was the head coach. So I went up and got dressed and went down to the bubble to work out. And I walked in and they threw me a football and said, Scott Zolak's over there, snap the ball to Zolak. And Parcells is standing there. I looked at Parcells. I go, I don't play center. I haven't played center. He goes, well, you do today. And I ended up snapping to Zolak, and he tried to sign me as a free agent center. So it just happens. If players are good, they're going to figure it out. There are some intricacies to it. And that's why I like his intelligence. I like his IQ. You watch him play. He uses it when he plays. Duke's a hard team to really kind of knock down and evaluate pass protection and tackles because they utilize a really mobile quarterback they have for quite some time under Manny Diaz. So a lot of times you don't got to hang on very long. That quarterback's gone. It's like one read and he goes. So that's a little bit different. But I look at him, you can tell he uses his intelligence, his smarts. He doesn't bust plays. And I don't think it'll be that hard of a transition. And honestly, when he agents up, and he might have already done that, I'm sure there's been conversations about it, and I wouldn't doubt if he's already hasn't been working on it. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that center is a definite viable probability or possibility for Parker.
Okay, So the next player we're going to talk about is Connor Lew. Now, Connor Lew from Auburn is a junior, and he literally tore his ACL last weekend. So we're very confident Connor Lew is going back to school. But Owen, when you watched Connor Lew, what did you see?
Yeah, he's a guy that it's really disappointing, especially with the fact that he was such a young player that you're like, okay, if he's playing at the level he's playing it already. He's played 400 snaps his true freshman year at Auburn at center. And then now he's in his third year. You're thinking, okay, he's at this level as such a young player. We can get him out in the league, and he'd be a guy that develops through that more pro process while he's still at a younger age. And it was kind of lining up to be kind of more one of these higher picks at the interior offensive line position because everything was lining up between his talent, age, and just where he was at in his playing at the college level. Now with his injury, going to go back. But prior to that, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this if he does go back and then into next year's process, he's a guy that is already there a lot. He has a lot of snaps under his belt, especially even though being a 3-year junior. Active feet, a ton of quick foot. We were talking a lot about with Brian Parker, how he, with the movement to center, you got to be a kind of a good athlete to be able to play that position because not only are you getting out of your stance and having to explode out and fire in the middle of that offensive line to get into the teeth of the defense, especially if you have like a zero tech or a nose tech lined up over you, you have now to operate from a stance where you aren't having your eyes up and full ability to bring both your hands with you out of the way because you have to focus on getting that snap through and making that clean operation. So for me, Connor Lew kind of met those expectations of athleticism, being able to explode out of the stance, work with that burst. Auburn's offense kind of frustrated me a bit when watching him because a lot of times I felt like he wasn't allowed to be more of a mauler or show off some power if he does have in his system because they run a lot of the RPO stuff where he can't really pin his ears back and get downfield and drive guys out of his lanes because he can't get caught up downfield, especially when they're going to pull the ball. So a lot of times he's working on flipping his hips, walling off, and creating those lanes while assisting out his guards to seal that off and climb to the next level when he does get a true run step. So there's a lot of plays where he's using athleticism. He has some of that power in his game, but nothing that you want to really hang your hat on or nothing that he's been able to show off to this point because I think schematically he's kind of held back a bit there. But for me, technique-wise, athleticism, and everything you're really looking for in a center, especially someone, again, it's coming along as young as he is, Lew showed that off a ton. And I did think there was a lot more ceiling with it if he can just be expanded more into more of a pro system where he's able to operate without having to keep a mind open to the fact that he can't get too far into his sets or too far downfield for that RPO scheme where Auburn's running RPO basically every single play. The offensive line isn't given a ton of chances to fire out and be that kind of dominant downfield presence.
You know, I watched quite a bit of him. I saw him play against Oklahoma earlier in the year. I think Owen's assessment of him is spot on. I think he's a very, very good athlete, probably an above average and elite athlete at the position, not densely built. He's a guy that was going to struggle against two-gap type defensive tackles. You don't expect him to really get much movement with his power, but he's an exceptional leader. He's very, very smart. You can tell how he is. He kind of reminds me of a Frank Ragnow. Maybe Tyler, you're going to have to help me with this name, Biadaz, the starting center for the Washington Commanders. More lighter guys that are real mobile that can move around. There's schemes across the NFL for a guy like Connor Lew. I think that he'll definitely be on a team at some point if he comes back well from this ACL. But I think he projects as a guy who is going to possibly be a starter in the league. But again, I think, you know, it's a scheme type thing. I don't think you're going to line him up in say the AFC North where you're going to play against head up nose guards a lot like with Pittsburgh and expect him to move a Cam Hayward and two gap type players. He's a guy that can get out and screens, like I said, runs well, all those things. And I think Owen was dead on with him. I think it was a spot on assessment and evaluation. You know, it does stink. I hate when guys get hurt, especially a guy like Lew, but obviously he's got the year to come back. What'll be interesting to see is if his head coach is still there when he comes back next year, and maybe he does get the opportunity to put on film playing in a different scheme under a different coach because obviously Auburn is struggling.
Yeah, and I need a fact check on this, but one of the draft professors said that if Lew was in this draft class, he would have been the youngest player in the class.
Right. Right.
So he
Right.
still has a runway to get better. And while the injury is a minor setback, the future is definitely looking bright for Connor Lew. And Eric Smith in the chat has him as a high day 2 as well. So, Owen, what was your assessment of Lew? Was it day 1 or day 2?
So I had him with a high day 2 grade. Obviously, the positional value is going to hold him back from being able to be pushed up past that. I did just quickly check what his age is right now. He was born August 30th, 2005, which, I mean, and I know this is going to be me saying this in this specific call, but that makes me feel a bit old that those guys are the ones born 2005 that are in the league now. But he's definitely a young player, just recently turning 20 before the season started. I really did like his film. Now, while I did think the power element of his game was holding him back, especially like what Jerry was talking about as a schematic versatility purpose, I do think that if you were able to get him in your pro weight room, he's still growing into his body, that he can develop that a bit more. It feels the same way I felt when I was watching Creed Humphrey at Oklahoma, where he was a guy that got out of the stance, was absolutely very mobile out of that center position, which you really do like from a pivot player, because you want them to be able to get into guys, especially if you're going against nose tackles or zero techs, where you're going to be, especially if you're only 300 pounds, you're going to be giving up a lot of that weight advantage to them. If you can, the faster you can get into them and into their blocks and try to take over the block sooner, it can help mitigate some of those issues. But for me, I felt like Creed Humphrey has developed definitely a power element to his game in the NFL after he's come out of Oklahoma, despite being kind of on the lighter side of that. I felt there was a projection with Lew, with his age, with his ability he already has technically, and with his athleticism, that you could pack on a bit more weight in the pro level to get him and fix those deficits. But for me, him going back to school for another year isn't going to be terrible as long as he recovers fully from the knee, because it's another year in a weight system at Auburn, which is still an SEC power school. And if he does have a different scheme, I do think that he can continue to build on that. But for me, I had him at day 2. I don't know if he can progress much further than that next season unless he absolutely comes back rocked up and ready to go and can exhibit some more of those different elements that he wasn't able to this year at Auburn.
Yeah, and I saw Eric's question, can Lew play guard for a team that has a center entrenched? I don't think so. I don't think he's a guard. I think he is a specific center. I think that's why he's got a higher day 2 assessment by some, like Owen says, is because if you pick him, it's because you're bringing him into play. You're bringing him to play and play early. And what I mean by play, I mean start. I don't think this is a guy you just sit around. If you're going to burn a second-round pick on this guy, you're bringing him into play. But no, I don't think he can move the guard. I think he's specifically a center, and that's where his career will be.
Okay, let's move on. The next player. So, Owen, I think we covered Bryce Foster last year on the same podcast. What do you have on Bryce Foster from Kansas?
I do. I think we did cover him. He's another guy. We talked about. Lew is 6'3", 300. Bryce Foster is 6'5", 310. So 10 more pounds with 2 extra inches on top of that. Another guy that's kind of this taller, leaner build. And it kind of wins in the same ways that Lew does when it comes to exploding out of the stance, using that athleticism to kind of cross face, cut off those 3 techs when you're having those guards pull, which is really important, especially if you're going to have a lot of movement in your front. You want to be able to have a guy that at center can snap it and get over and recover that space and be that cutoff blocker. I do think Foster does that very well. For me, I wasn't the biggest fan of Foster in my watch through, just because I felt like he, especially against teams that had some blitzing backers or had some more finesse style interior rushers, if he wasn't the better athlete in position, I felt like he could get easily blown by sometimes or give up his anchor a bit too much. So for me, I think Foster is a guy that if you have a scheme-specific kind of look at it, maybe even less so than a Lew, where Lew, I do have faith he could put on some weight and has shown some flashes where I think he could maybe be more comfortable in different kind of schematic looks, but you definitely he has a solidified role in one. Foster, I didn't really see a ton that made me believe that, okay, he has the floor of being able to come in, start right away, and then you can throw a little bit more on his plate if you can add some more weight on. So I think he is, especially like you're looking at like the Dolphins with Aaron Brewer, you have these teams that if they like those move style centers, especially where you're asking them to do those high mobility type of plays, that's where he's going to excel the most in. But for me, he didn't really have the floor as some of these other players where he was giving up a lot of plays to interior rush, especially if he couldn't be the more dominant athlete in the matchup.
I agree with Owen on this one. I was not very impressed with Bryce Foster either when I watched his film. He's thick-calved, thick-ankled. He is 6'5", but if on film, if you kind of look at it, he seems short-armed, which you would think, why does that pose a problem at center? Like I said earlier, when you're snapping a ball in the hands between your legs, a lot of times your step, body positions, and that off arm are what saves you. And when it's not long, you can't get it in spots that it needs to be. I thought he was average in space as well, Owen. I didn't think he was, he can get moved. If he got angles and stuff like that, I think he can get in position. But I didn't think if it was a deal where they were neck and neck and he had to get to a spot that he was very good at it. I thought he got beat second level and those types of things. So, one of the things about Foster, he's got a ton of experience. He's an SEC guy now playing in the Big 12. But I think he's more along the lines of an old school center, man. I think he's more like a Tim Grunhard that played many years for the Chiefs. Put a nose guard on top of him and let him dance with the walrus every play, meaning snap the ball and go chest to chest, belly to belly, and have a wrestling match. I think that's where he would thrive. But I was a little bit disappointed. I think it's a point where you watch him. You need to watch more film this year. Owen, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but he does wear a knee brace on one knee. I did not know if that was maybe an issue right now that he's playing hurt, and maybe that's why he's got some limited space mobility right now. So I'd like to watch maybe some more games as the season goes on. But right now, this present evaluation, guys like Lew and some others we're going to talk about, even Brian Parker intrigued me much more at center than Foster does.
Yeah, I think I definitely had that down in my notes. I forgot to mention was especially with a player like him, where you're going to want him to, with some of his wins coming from him being that player to climb the second level, you'd expect him to be able to go up there and make those plays. But he was oftentimes missing to the spot where the linebacker was, and they were able to undercut him and get under his gap there. So I felt like for me, especially with where I saw him at as a player in the trenches, if you weren't going to be able to win some of those matchups against these, guys who can win with more finesse there on the line, he should be able to go up to the second level, and maybe that's where his power can take over as against smaller level defenders. But even then, he's not able to really line up his blocks and stick to them and attack that second level. So you're looking at a player that, while he does some things well, and I'm not sure about the knee brace. I'm gonna have to go back and check because I have access to some older film too to see if maybe that's just a thing he's been wearing in his college career, if he's undergone a specific injury. But for me, a lot of the stuff that you would kind of look for as the glimmer of hope in some of the reps that, like, okay, if he doesn't do this well, he can do this. He didn't really meet the expectations for a lot of stuff I had. So I'm definitely going to have to look in to see if he is hurt, because he has been a long time starter. He was at Texas A&M before this, and then went to Kansas, has played there for 2 years, exclusively at center. So obviously he's been recruited and played at some higher level schools. So there's definitely got to be something in there that I am still searching for. But for right now, of this group, he was probably one of my least favorite watch of them.
I think, Owen, you'll see this, and you know this. You've done a ton of evaluation. You've done much more than I ever have. But I always go back to 6'5", 330. I mean, he has something you can't teach. And college coaches, whether you can bend or not bend, move or not move, they're always going to take a chance on size over anything else. And, I just watch him, and you'd expect him to be a guy that can grab people and really move them. And his style of play is almost more amoeba than it is bull, if that makes sense. I just don't think, he kind of oozes into things and engulfs guys and keeps guys from making plays just by walling and stuff, as opposed to physically putting his hands on somebody in a violent manner and moving them from point A to point B, which you would expect a guy that's 6'5", 330 to be able to do. So like I said, I'd like to see more film of him as the season goes on, just to see how he progresses.
Owen, is your grade draftable?
It's on the lower end, just because, like, as you were saying, he has some size. He was recruited to these high level schools, and you see some of the stuff where, like, okay, when he's able to line up and not have to deal with, especially like what Jerry was talking about with the zero techs and nose tackles on him, when he can keep the guy in front of him, and like I was kind of saying, if he can be more of the better athlete in the operation, he can keep guys in front of him and play soundly. So I have him with a day around 6, around 7 grades. So like you take him maybe he's a guy that you can see on your practice squad roster. You draft him in those grounds just specifically to maybe you have a needed center, you want to bring in some competition, or you're looking to see maybe if you can project to some of the other positions you have on your line. And if not, you still him on your practice squad, continue to work with him, see if you can work through some of the other stuff that he's already had issues with. But for me, I don't think he's a guy that you're drafting either with expectations of being a starter or even as a primary backup in your interior positions, at least in year one.
When you said he was 310, I look at him on film. I think he's much more than that. I think he's about 330, 335. And I think a big part of his draftability is going to be what he does in Indianapolis at the combine. If he is that heavy, he needs to cut weight before the combine and really work on his movement stuff and see if he can get a copy of the O-line drills and those types of things. I think his place, whether it be later in day 3 or early day 3, or if somebody really takes a liking to him and takes a chance on him late in day 2, I think a lot of that's going to revolve around a couple of things. One, probably being the Senior Bowl or one of the off-season bowl games, and the other is the combine.
Okay. Next player we're going to cover, Cayden Green from Missouri. So my understanding is he still has another year of eligibility. But, Owen, what did you see when you watched Cayden Green?
Yeah, he's a tackle right now in Missouri, and if I was personally being honest, just to open up with this, I do think he should probably go back for that extra season. Just watching him at tackle, you see a lot of plays where when he's in space or when he's trying to be this more physically dominant player, he can have lapses in his technique that you'd want to see him clean up a bit more and be more refined because he has the size, he has some lateral movement that he's able to get out in space. They use him a lot with screens or when asking him to climb to the second level and collapse and get up to that the play side backer or the backside backer there. He can really make guys move and use his ability to collapse those angles. So I think he has the size. You see that 6'5", 324. If he kicked inside, you wouldn't be losing that a ton. But he is kind of stiff in his stance. I know that was a big thing when I was working at UB. One of the main things to look at when you're looking at like high schoolers is like, are they stiff not in their movements, but are they stiff just sitting in their stance? And Green is really high-hipped. You can see he's not the most comfortable getting down in that lower three-point stance. So you're hoping maybe he can work on maybe dropping a little bit of weight if he wants to continue being offensive tackle. If not, just you really utilizing some more downhill aspects and being a power blocker as a guard if he does kick inside. I do think if he does go inside, the length may become more of an advantage for him there. Whereas a tackle, I think it's just kind of average. So for me, going back for another year and being a guy that could really explode with some highlight plays when it comes to, really paving some roads on the interior offensive line, or even if they keep him at tackle at Missouri next year, they could do that. But I really would be looking for him to continue to grow technically and kind of build that floor up there where then you can start looking at those high level plays and being like, okay, this is a guy I'm willing to take a swing on.
Oh, I like when Owen goes first because it validates a lot of my thoughts, and I had the same exact thought process watching Cayden Green. He should go back to college. I've got history with Cayden Green because he started out, if you remember, at Oklahoma, and then basically his father went into the office and said he's worth this much money, pay him or he's gone. They didn't pay him, and he left and went to Missouri, where they did pay him. You can kind of see it in this picture, and I noticed it right away on film. He is thin-ankled, thin-calfed, and thin-kneed, and all of his weight is above his waist. He's kind of a bigger guy up above the waist, and it kind of makes him have that look of unsteadiness because he's got these small ankles and calves and knees, and it's holding up all this mass above him. He's got some – it's hard to believe in this time and age in the way that these kids are in the weight room as much as they are, but he seems to have some conditioning issues and maybe some durability issues and things like that. I would say that he would benefit from moving into guard next year, go back to college and move into guard. The problem is would his father allow them to take him from left tackle and move him into guard? That is a definite thing that you need to look at and think about because his father is very involved in his development in college. I think he's got a lot of things you like, but like Owen, it's just kind of all over the place. You might see it for a second and then he tries to hit the gas pedal to finish something and he gets overextended. And that's one thing he does quite a bit, gets over his toes, gets overextended and loses balance and things like that. But as far as a prospect goes this year, if I was looking at him, I would say just on size and the fact that he was a left tackle guy in college, they'd probably maybe a day 2 definite early day 3 guy. If he goes back to college and refines some of his weaknesses, which obviously are some of the technique stuff with overextending and lunging, refine his footwork, work on his agility and his conditioning and his durability and all those types of things, because like I said, he almost has the appearance that he's walking on eggshells or he's on the deck of a boat out in the Bering Sea, right? He's got that kind of weird, like he's always trying to find his balance. And because of that, it hurts him in picking up stunts and blitz recognition and things like that. So, obviously, if he works on those things, yeah, I think body-wise and things like that and prospect-wise, at the size he is, he could go a lot higher, but he will definitely benefit from going back to school, I think.
Yeah, and even like in the pre-draft, or I guess the preseason, not pre-draft, preseason process for this upcoming year, back in the summer scouting, I was talking with some of their draft professors, and we did some mock drafts, and he was a very popular pick to go in the first round, especially to like the Bills at 32 or wherever they had him located, because they were projecting him more of a need at the interior offensive line position there, and they were projecting Green inside because even in last year at Missouri, you could see the kind of that size, the ability to move guys against their will, and it's still the limitations in movement that you could project them better inside. So even back in the summer before the season's tape got put on film, he was getting projected inside and thinking like, okay, if he was to do that and you could hide some of those weaknesses, he could be a first-round talent type player, which kind of reflects what Jerry was saying, that like even just off the size alone, he could be a day two guy from teams that think that they could get the most out of him. I think his best position to get himself into a first round pick, and maybe if he gets an agent that can talk to his father or him about it and really drill it into them that this is the best for his future career, that if he goes back and then goes to be moved inside, that he could be a guy that matches up to that preseason hype that we saw, where a guy of that size, that ability to move guys out of their way, and still has some ability when moving downhill or in space to go out and make some blocks in space. He could be a dude that could really up his stock. But if he comes out this year, he'll get drafted off of potential basically alone, but there's going to be a lot more a project than you're going to want to see, especially at a guy who's going to be drafted relatively high because of tools.
I think that's a great call. I think I've been trying to comp him, been trying to think of who he reminds me of. And when you bring up the Bills, he reminds me of an Osiris Torrance. They play very similar. Osiris has issues on the second level. He's a grab and wrestle guy. There are times when he gets downhill and moves people, but if you watch this season in his third year, Torrance hasn't been as good as I thought he would be, but they're very, very similar in their play styles. And again, Torrance, a tackle in college at Florida before, he transferred there from one of the Louisiana schools. And now he's inside at right guard for the Bills. And he's also a high leverage guy, guys that, that Cromer likes. And that's kind of what Cayden Green is. You talked about stiffen the stance. I agree with that 100%, but he is a high leverage player, and that's things that Cromer likes. So yeah, that's a good call by you as far as that 32 overall to Buffalo or 31
and
overall to Buffalo.
Owen, is your grade a day 2 project or a day 3 project?
If he came out this year, I would probably be on that borderline where it's a higher day 3 grade just because you're giving him the benefit of the doubt with some of those tools. But when looking at I couldn't give him the grade off the film with day 2s because I felt like technically he was so far behind the ball that if you're investing a day 2 pick into a guy, you're hoping to get something out of him sooner rather than later. Whereas Green, it's kind of up in the air whether or not you can get him, how quickly you can get him on the field at post drafting him.
I was anticipating that it was going to be day 3, but I wanted you to say it out loud. Okay. So Francis Mauigoa from Miami. So Jerry, the first time I ever saw you on a podcast was with Sarah Larson. She and I chat once in a while. She is a Bills fan. She is a Miami fan. Some people have Francis Mauigoa as their number 1 offensive lineman in the entire draft. Jerry, I'm really curious to hear what you think of the Miami offensive line.
I think he's probably the highest rated guy on the board, and I agree with that. I think the reason why is because he's got the cleanest projection. Okay, there are no question marks about this guy. I mean, what you see is what you get. He's playing right tackle for Miami. He will play inside in the NFL, and he will probably end up being a Pro Bowl guard. That is what he does. He is a massive man, 6'6", 315. He can bend. He can move. he brings natural power with him. I mean, you can see the difference in power styles and players. There's weight room power, and then there's just natural power. Okay. That is something that I look at and cherish. And this is what this guy has. I mean, he's got natural power to move people. He's got heavy hands, and those types of things. While he's playing right tackle in Miami, he does have some issues with the wide rush. He's not a really classic drive catch guy, and he's really not even a vertical set guy. I mean, I would like to see him kind of vertical set with his width and just how big he is. You teach him vertical set like a Deion Dawkins, you got something. He turns a little bit early, therefore he has issues with speed rushers and things like that. But again, Miami's a lot like Duke. They're not looking for their tackles to pass block for 6, 7, 8 seconds. I mean, you give that quarterback enough time to make a read, and then we'll go from there. But, you look at this guy, cleanest projection probably of this group, and probably will end up being as far as the offensive line evaluations. I really like him. I think he's an early starter and can get better and better. I think that he probably could stand being with a nutritionist in an NFL weight room all day long to where they can monitor what he puts in his body. Could probably lose a little bit of weight. They say he's 315. I don't think he's 315. I think he's more than 315. But I like him a lot. He's nasty. He'll finish blocks. What you see is what you get. So, yeah, I think the projection is clean. And the cool part is this, guys. I mean, and you know this, Owen, from doing this for a long time. It's a lot easier to take a guy and move him inside after playing offensive tackle and know that if it hits the fan, I can move him back outside if I need him, because our roster depth, is a certain amount. I mean, he can go out and play right tackle if you need him to. But I think it's wasting his best attributes. You move him inside, he's a Pro Bowler at guard. Really seamless change there, and the cleanest evaluation I think we saw out of this group.
Yeah, I think easily he's the highest rated player we're going to have out of this group, and like you said, cleanest projection. It's funny that you brought up Deion Dawkins, because I had the same question marks when watching him as a pass protector, and this goes back to even when I was watching him in the summer, because you talk about he struggles with getting that depth versus speed. And especially, I think it was the Notre Dame game in week 1, he opened himself up a lot to the inside spin counters because he's overcompensating for the fact that he can't get that depth as cleanly. And when you bring up Deion Dawkins, that was one of the guys I was looking at, like, okay, if he is going to exist on a tackle in the NFL, he's going to need to take an approach where he's trying to get into and latch onto as soon as possible into his pass drops as he can and limit the amount of space, kind of like how we saw how Deion's been lining up with more space between him and his guard, kind of taking away that exterior angle from that wider rusher, because he doesn't want to be able to give up that outside shoulder nearly as easily. So if he can get out and get attached as quickly as possible, that'll probably be his best case scenario. But even then, that's a veteran offensive tackle who's been a multi-time Pro Bowler that's able to know how the speed of the NFL is and then adapt to that accordingly. With Mauigoa, he's going to be a guy that I think best exemplifies his traits, where he's going to be best at in the interior as a guard. So, like you were saying, I think kicking inside, utilizing that ability that he has with his power to move guys out of the way, but also now you're limiting the space that he has to pass protect in, is going to limit his deficiencies that he has when he is trying to get depth and attack against speed. You're closing up the space that he has to work in, and that'll really benefit to him when it comes to being a player that has less negative plays. Now you'll be able to really show off the positive plays, and that's when you're starting to talk about Pro Bowl style players, when they can be more of a positive than a lack of negative.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this guy, I want him inside because I want him in a phone booth. I mean, he's violent, and he's going to win a fist fight, and that's what you're going to get out of him at guard. To go back to that tackle discussion, you look at Deion Dawkins and you look at Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown is a classic drive-catch tackle. He drives with his inside foot, catches with his outside foot, is able to get depth and width through that drive-catch phase. What Spencer does is clinic film. You can take his film to clinics and walk up there and say, this is what it should look like, and put Spencer Brown up there. Then you take Deion, and you don't take any of his film within 150 miles of the clinic because it's so off the charts and abstract. But what Deion is so good at in that vertical set is, like you talked about and we're so on top of, he messes with defensive linemen by the amount of split he takes before the snap of the ball. He manipulates the edge through those splits, and then you watch him. He's not drive catching off his back foot or off his inside foot. He's almost backpedaling, and that's that verticality, that vertical set game, which I think that if this guy stays out of tackle, could probably use and learn and be good at it because of the width he has. And he is a good athlete. He's just, he's just not a great drive catch type guy. So, yeah, I mean, a team that wants to keep him at right tackle, so be it. Cut his weight, get him a little bit leaner, get him a little bit better in shape, and really work on that pass pro technique. But honestly, I just think it's wasting his God-given talents by not moving him in the guard and just letting him beat up people for 4 quarters.
Okay, so anything else on Francis Mauigoa? Are we ready to go to the next one?
We can go to the next
I
one.
think there's he's such a good player that you hit on the stuff right away, and you're like, well, there's not much really to delve any deeper. You know who he is, you know how good he is. That's just how it is with some of these top tier players. It gets kind of boring after a while. So
Right.
like, oh yeah, he does everything great. You just put him there and he goes and kicks ass.
We
Yep.
see, and that's why at Draft Professor, we try to talk about the players in rounds 1 through 5 because it gives us more to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, what you see is what you get with the guy.
Yep. Okay, so the next player we're going to talk about is Ioane Vega. Okay, and it'll be Vega for short. And Jerry, I know when you and I were messaging ahead of the podcast, you really liked Vega. You want to tell everybody what you saw?
Yeah, I mean, I think this guy, and one of the things that I did when I watched film, but I also kind of went out, plugged them in, and tried to gather as much information about these players as I could, just to kind of get a background on them. And the one thing that that I was excited about with Vega was the fact that he hasn't been playing football very long. He didn't play until high school, and I don't think it was till maybe his sophomore or junior year that he started playing. And now he's starting at one of the best programs in the country. I love this guy. Out of this group, as far as if you take the last guy we talked about, and you have to forgive me, I'm not great with names, so you can pronounce his name, Mauigoa. Even as much as I like Mauigoa, I really like Vega. I think that he translates immediately from college to the NFL as a starter. I think he's a great athlete. I think he's long. He's fit. They list him at 6'4", 330. If he's 330, that's one of the more fit 330s you'll see. He's able to get movement on his own without double teams. He's able to win the leverage battle. As he gets to the league and they work on some things, obviously hands are going to be part of that. I think he could probably benefit from independent hand usage because he is such a good athlete. And once he gets those hands on you, he can move you and do what he wants. He competes. He finishes blocks. I think some of maybe the weaknesses he has will get better as he plays more football, as far as, blitz pickups, stunts, and things like that. But I like the guy. And the other thing about him is this, and you'll hear me talk about this, and it kind of goes along the lines of a guy like Caden Barnett, as opposed to some of these other dudes, and Barnett's been pretty good in pass pro, but you've got to be an elite pass blocker to play in the NFL. The guy that's getting 20 to 25% of your salary cap is lined up behind you. That guy can't be on the ground. You've got to be able to pass pro to play in this league. End of discussion. And this guy can do it. He's an elite pass blocker. I love the guy. I think that I like him as a day 2 guy, and who knows as the season goes along. Now, you don't know what's going to happen at Penn State with James Franklin not being there. Does that program fall apart? I think because he still has some developmental stuff, he's probably not a first rounder. I like him as a day 2 guy. And if he lasts to day 3, maybe the first 10 picks of the 3rd round. I mean, I think his upside, he's a really good player right now. Then you stick on top of it the upside that he has, he could be a perennial Pro Bowl type player in the league. I really like this guy a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
what did you think of Vega?
I was told, I was like, as soon as I got put on with Jerry and they were like, all right, we're gonna do this together. Jim texted me like, oh, Jerry really likes the Penn State guy, and I was like, all right, cool. So I'm gonna go watch him. If I don't like him, we're gonna have a problem. If I do like him, we'll be good for the rest of the time.
No, we won't have any problems.
Listen, you have to if you tune into Toronto, you'll see me and Newt. That is our classic thing where we will we'll go head to head about some random 5th round guy who's a 3rd stringer on Tennessee, and we're like, all right, I think this guy's awesome. Oh no, this guy sucks. And we'll go back to back. But I'm used to combativeness. But for me, like Vega is, I absolutely love him. He's a player that when I got to watching him, he's one of those dudes, especially on a team like Penn State that's such a high levels program. They moved him around just because they needed to get his advantage on all sides of the line. They would move him over to right tackle. He'd be a swing tight end for them sometimes when they wanted to unbalance the formation and just wanted power behind him and collapse that side of the line of scrimmage. So he's a dude that even Penn State themselves, who are known for producing offensive linemen, were utilizing him across all 5 spots or across both sides to really bolster their run game, especially with the back stable they have. Kind of like what Jerry was saying is that he's this nasty dude who has a lot of upside because he's a good athlete, new to the sport in general. And even though he's a 4-year junior at Penn State, so he has 1 more year of eligibility if he really wants it, I would see hopefully that he would come out now because the next step up is him going to a program and then continuing to learn from those guys and being molded. Because even now that he's so young, he does have good technique, especially in pass pro, where he's setting that floor high where you're like, okay, we're getting this guy in. If he ends up starting for us early on in his career, we know we have some stuff that we can work on, but we also have a decent floor to set with it that we can still plug him in or not be worried about it. But he also has that ceiling when it comes to his physical traits, his ability just to be able to move people, be a people mover out there. And like I said, they utilize him all over just to be able to operate that way in their run game. So for me, I have a high day 2 grade on him with my positional value, especially with how guards are getting paid in the NFL now. I've given the guards a bit of a bump when it comes to where they're going to be drafted and how teams are going to view them when multiplying their positional value by that. He is a guy who I've run to film grade on and that I could totally see being drafted in the back half of the 1st. If you're banking on that upside and ability to even from day 1 come in and earn a starting spot because he has some of those natural technique and natural ability to play just one-on-one in the phone booth. And as soon as he starts to learn to play more so as a group and with a line, I think he has tons of potential with that.
And while you look at him, and this is something you don't see in the NFL very, very often, I actually did it, but that was a long time ago when football was different. But he could get you out of a game as an emergency right tackle. I think he's got that kind of ability. Now, granted, he's 6'3", 6'4", so the NFL will poo-poo on that he's not tall enough. Which, whatever. I was just under 6'4" when I played outside and played 30-some games at right tackle, so it can be done. But as also proven by Tunch Ilkin, who was, I think, about 6'1" when he played tackle for the Steelers. But, you look at Vega, he is a guy that could give you emergency help outside of tackle. And I know that doesn't usually translate in the league. They don't like to take inside guys and move them out. But I think him being so raw in the game and not starting till a later age, we might not really know what he can do and not do. So there's that aspect as well. But like Owen said, he's got all these things that you see some players never develop, and he's already developed them, like extreme anchor ability and things like that, where it comes natural to him and you don't have to worry about him trying to learn it. He already knows it. But yeah, I like the guy a lot. I could see him being a definite day 2 guy. If for somehow, some way he lasts to day 3, it's going to be a high pick in the 3rd round. But I think he'll also thrive in Indianapolis if he does come out and decide to go to the league. I think he'll test very well.
Okay. The last player, Iapani Laloulu from Oregon, and his nickname is Poncho. So if you're watching an Oregon podcast, you're watching an Oregon game, the announcers are probably going to call him Poncho because they don't want to say Iapani. But Jerry, I know that, and before we go to Jerry, so draft professor Anthony Russo did a 3-round mock, and he put Laloulu to Buffalo in round 1. So there are people that really like him. Jerry, how much did you like Laloulu?
I like him a lot. I don't like him more than the Bills taking a wide receiver or safety or cornerback in round 1. I know that. But I do like him quite a bit. This Poncho, as they call him, he is a prototypical center. That's what he does. He could probably play some guard if he needed him to, but I like his attitude. I just watch him play, and I'm different than most people. I mean, if you ask a lot of these O-line, experts and guys that are O-line draft nicks and things like that, where would you start with your offensive line? How would you build it? And they'd be like, well, we'd go out and get the best left tackle we could possibly get. I wouldn't. The first guy I'd find is a badass at center that's a leader that plays with a lot of exuberance and energy and plays physical and does those things. I see this out of this guy. I think he's powerful. I think he's got heavy hands. I think, the thing that impressed me is he has the ability to get flat and reach shades pretty much at ease. He can reach a shade 1 technique, could probably get to a 2 technique if he had to, or a 2-eye. He was kind of effortless in his ability to reach guys on his own, which is big time in the NFL, because it allows you to do some other things with your lineman if you trust your center to be able to reach a 1 or a 2-eye. Some people probably look at him maybe as still a guy that has to develop some, and he does. There's some things that he needs to develop in. When you look at some of his stuff, probably needs to develop a little bit. While he has heavy hands, he's late with them. He's got to develop that, some things like that. But I think eventually he'll be a starting center in the league, maybe not year 1, but I think year 2, year 3, he's probably starting in the league. I love the guy. I really like his attitude. It kind of jumps off the screen to me, and I think you need that out of a center. And I got him as sometime in maybe a late day 2, day 3 guy. But I like this guy a lot.
Yeah, I was really happy with watching him. I watched him and Lew back to back. Watched Lew and Laloulu back to back at center here. And for me, they're very 2 different players for when it comes to looking at and examining centers specifically. We talked about with Lew, he's more of that athletic guy, doesn't really have the power base in him, but he's going to be able to flip his hips well off when healthy, obviously, and play that more movement style center positioning. Where with Laloulu, it was a lot of he gets out, he's giving guys shots in the ribs as he's flying up to the second level and knocking those guys out of his way. He's able to still have that good lateral mobility, kind of like what Jerry was talking about, where he's able to come over and reach guys despite being, 6'2", 330, and you're looking at him like, okay, he's got a thick build. He's going to be able to still move, and he has that ability to do that. So I did like that a lot. For me, he's a guy that he's sound and pass pro when it comes to being just a wall. Guys are going to try to run through him and bowl through him. If you don't have these more explosive and laterally quick D tackles, they're not going to be able to force themselves through him, through his chest to the quarterback. He creates that kind of front of the pocket that you're really looking for when it comes to a center pass protector. For me, I just think he can do a bit better when it comes to exploding out, staying low out of his stance, out of the center, especially when I was watching it back-to-back with Lew, having that guy be one of the more explosive guys out of his stance, especially at center, then switching over to Laloulu. It's like, okay, you can definitely see a difference in the tape there, but he's not lacking in it per se. It's not something that's going to hold him back as a prospect. So I think I like him a lot as a pivot piece for your power blocking offensive line when you're doing some more of those combo blocks at the second level, or when he can take over for some other guys in some wider zones. He can be that more balanced player. But I do think he excels the most when he is able to utilize that power and that nasty more consistently. And then as a pass protector, he does have some room to grow with other technical aspects of it. But for when just needing to be a guy that fronts up and prevents a D tackle from getting the easiest path possible to the quarterback, right up the center, he's able to step in and just absorb that contact and be that buffer for him.
What's funny is when you look at him, and he is 6'2", listed 6'2", he is kind of long-legged for a 6'2" guy. So I think that's where some of the leverage issues come from. He's a little bit longer legged. He's probably more comfortable in that high leverage spot as opposed to being a guy down low, really being down closer to the ground. But some of the things I look at from him, one thing it's interesting. You brought it up, Owen. He has the ability to slide over and snap up on that hip and snap that hip and get movement and then get to the second level. But they do trust him quite a bit to block guys by himself, whether it be reaching the lineman like we talked about, reaching a 1 technique or a 2 technique or 2-eye. They'll send him up to the second level immediately as well. So he's got some versatility there and things like that. But I just really, whatever limitations he has, I think he makes up for it with just, you can watch, like I said, you watch the film and he has a joy of playing football and it's infectious. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me and that I like about the kid. I know we had a question earlier kind of comparing him to Lew. Lew, I think, is better, like Owen said. He's much more of a movement guy, a lateral guy, get up to the second level. He doesn't have the heavy hands or the small area nastiness that Pancho has. They're 2 totally different players. So if you're wanting a guy to be a pure outside zone guy or run a bunch of fold schemes where you want to, block down and pull the center and those types of things, if that's high in your your requirements for your center, then you go with a Lew. If you want somebody that can do a lot of different things but has that attitude and that nastiness and just, can play with a certain physicality, then you go with Pancho. So I think they're 2 completely different players.
Yeah, and I had that reflected with where I had them graded. I had Lew graded slightly higher just because I did like a lot of his stuff when it came to pass blocking as well, technically, and just having that bit of an edge as an athlete overall. But I did have Pancho taking him clean on all the other power elements and being able to be that guy that can be that center pivot when you're looking to be more of a power-based scheme. So I had Lew slightly graded ahead of him, but I had them both in the same kind of basket where it was borderline round 2, round 3 grades for me, where you're looking at these guys, they're getting a bit of a bump with from their center position multiplier, just because teams are going to be looking for that as an important position, especially kind of like what you were talking about. When you're looking to build your offensive line out, you want to make sure you have those athletic tackles. Sure, that's why those guys get paid the big bucks and get drafted top 10. But if you're looking for a guy in the 2nd, 3rd rounds, you're looking for a player that can, like a Lew, like a Laloulu, that can be that centerpiece for you, that has the intelligence to play the position and also, depending on your scheme, fit what you're looking for and can kind of meld the rest of that interior 3 together and be that kind of glue piece. So I have them both, Lew previously before the injury, but Laloulu definitely still as like a borderline round 2, round 3 type player.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, well, why don't we pause for a second? So we have several people in the chat, so I want to give a shout out. So Newt Weston, Newt will be podcasting with Owen on defensive line tomorrow night. Want to give a shout out to Newt. Eric Smith, you have been a very loyal follower of the Draft Professor since we created it. It is great to see you stop by. And Jerry, Eric put something in the chat. His high school team plays against your high school.
Yeah, if you could put it in the chat, which high school team is that, Eric? If you could put that over there, let me know what high school team it is. Now, I left Philadelphia when I was 18 years old, and so I would consider myself probably more of an Okie than I do a Pennsylvanian, but definitely still have people back there. Okay, yeah, Carlisle. What's funny is, and when you say Carlisle, you're talking about the central part of the state, right? So Carlisle, the tie between Oklahoma and Carlisle is that's where Owen or Jim Thorpe, is that correct, Eric? The Jim Thorpe is buried in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Am I correct? I think that's the tie between Oklahoma and Carlisle. I actually wrestled in a wrestling tournament in Carlisle one year, and we stayed in billet. We stayed in billet homes, so we spent the night up in Carlisle. Carlisle also home of Jeff Lebo and Billy Owens. There you go. Not buried, but went to high school, went to Indian school there. Okay, yeah, I knew there was a tie somewhere.
Yeah, and
I was gonna say I just fact checked it. Jim Thorpe is buried in what is now known as Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour and 50 minutes from Carlisle.
There we go. All right, thank you very much.
So, and Jerry, when we're done going through all the offensive linemen, I had already chatted with Eric that Eric will be likely evaluating a lot of the same players that we are,
right.
And we'll all come on and compare and contrast big boards. Owen, Jerry, Eric, and there might be a few other people that want to come on and discuss some of their favorite offensive line prospects with you.
Okay.
So, Jerry, do you want to take a moment, introduce yourself? There's a lot of people here that may not know your legend. You're a legend within Bills Mafia, but there's plenty of non-Bills people in the chat.
Right.
Feel free to introduce yourself and let everybody know about all the other content that you make.
Yeah, so quick lineage about me. Grew up outside of Philadelphia, up around Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Moved to Tulsa in 1988. Went to college out here. Stayed out here. My parents moved out here eventually, but was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs back then in the 10th round. Was released by the Chiefs. Marty Schottenheimer was the head coach. Had a choice to go to either Buffalo, Atlanta, New England, or Jacksonville. And for some reason chose to go to Atlanta and realized real quick I was not a run and shoot offensive lineman. And they released me. And then partway through that season, Dwight Adams, who at the time was the director of college scouting for the Bills and was a Little Rock native, was in Tulsa scouting players. And my offensive line coach, I was working for the team at the time, and he goes, "Hey, somebody wants to see in my office." And it was Dwight. And after we exchanged pleasantries, and he cussed me out for 15 minutes for not going to Buffalo instead of going to Atlanta. Told me that there was a practice squad spot open, and it was probably going to happen in a couple of weeks, and he wanted me to have it. And that's exactly what happened. And went up to Buffalo on a Monday. Took a physical Tuesday morning, worked out Tuesday afternoon, practiced Wednesday, and didn't leave for 10 years. So was in Buffalo for 10 years, on the practice squad a little bit. Ended up starting like 106 games for the Bills at 4 positions, both guard, center, and right tackle. Not left tackle. That's the only one I didn't play. And then when I retired, did some things. But right now, I'm part of a group called Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. It's myself, John Fina, a former teammate of mine, was left tackle, and Joe Miller. And the three of us do content on Overreaction. And then this year was asked to join Joe Marino of Locked On Bills, and then also Jeremy White, who's the morning show host for WGR. And we do a show called Bill Squad twice a week on the Locked On Network. So lots of chances to check me out on different various content shows. And now I'm on here with you guys with the Draft Professor. So I guess I can go ahead and claim myself a professor, although I never would do that. I don't nearly have the experience you guys do of evaluating players, but I do believe that I can see some things and traits and stuff that I think are advantageous to have when trying to play line in the league. And this has been fun. As much as it is as fun, it's a learning experience for myself on evaluating players. And I love to look at the film and things like that. So it kind of was it's kind of something natural for me. So I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to doing the other shows with you guys.
Yeah. Oh, and you want to let everybody know about the Weekly Huddle and everything else that you do.
Yeah, so I'm over at the Weekly Huddle on YouTube and Twitter. I'm also here at the Draft Press. We talked about it a little earlier. Tuesdays now with Jerry, who again was a big element of the Buffalo Bills, especially when I started I told other people that I was working with you on these podcasts. They all kind of lost their stuff because everyone knows who Jerry is around here in Buffalo. But I'm also going to be on Wednesday nights with Newt, who was in the chat, covering over D lineman at 9 p.m.s. Just a little background on myself. I was previously working at the University of Buffalo, which is a D1 MAC school, as a scouting intern, working with them in the recruiting office, watching film, helping them, and working hand-in-hand with the coaches to develop their boards and how they should pursue recruiting for the future season. So I have experience working with that previously, just always working with podcasts and stuff, been doing the Weekly Huddle since 2020. Still working on getting some more content out over there. And with the increase in volume of guys I'm watching, I'm going to be hopping on and doing some more streams, especially since now my football coaching season is over. So I will be having a little bit more free time to hop on and do some live streams, live watching the players that we will then be talking about later on in those episodes on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So you can go over, check that out on Kick, Weekly Huddle on Kick. Or if you miss those live streams, you can always go on the Patreon for, I think it's $1 a month. I have it set out right now. You get access to the VODs and rewatch those and listen to me talk about these players in real time and give my opinion as I'm watching through the film.
So I appreciate both of you coming on to Draft Professor. The channel doesn't function without guests such as yourself. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next week, the offensive linemen that we are going to be discussing include Drew Shelton, the offensive tackle from Penn State, Telek Lockett from Texas State, Ryan Baer from Pittsburgh, Isaiah World from Oregon, Wendell Moe Jr. from Tennessee, Parker Brailsford from Alabama, J.C. Davis from Illinois, Armaj Reed Adams from Texas A&M, and Carter Smith from Indiana. So we'll be breaking down those offensive linemen. If you're looking for a different position, go to NFL Draft Fanatic right there on X. The entire podcast schedule is pinned to my profile. So we're here at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern every weeknight. And the only thing that changes is who the podcasters are and what positions they're covering. So for Jerry, Owen, myself, for the 106 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for stopping by. And we will see you on a podcast again tomorrow, everybody.
See you.